Hey everyone, Southie here. We got the nostalgias coming up on the 26th of November, so there's a few little things I want to get done to the car before then, and one of them is a test and tune on the 18th, so a couple of weeks and we should be out on the track testing and running the car. It's been a while. It's been a very wet period here in Queensland, so every time we've gone to take the car out it's rained, so hopefully we'll get some runs on the board leading up to the nostalgias. Car's pretty good. It's ready to go. The nostalgias were originally meant to be held a couple of months ago, so had the car ready for then, but there's just some fine tuning that I want to do to it now that I've had a bit of extra time leading up to the nostalgias. So one of the things with this car is I've always struggled with it down low. It's got a real big flat spot in it. It stumbles and falls over itself. Really strong in the top end, but down low it's a real pig, and this car does have a massive cam in it, which doesn't help. But I've been playing around with the jetting and power valve setup in the Strombergs. And I'm starting to get pretty close to it. So from that, I've been speaking to Clive at Stromberg Carburetors over in the UK, and Clive was an absolute gentleman to deal with. I asked him if he had a certain size power valve, which is no longer available. He went and found a couple sitting in the warehouse, and he packaged them up and sent them over to me, and it was a really good price as well. So Clive at Stromberg, thank you, you're a legend. I've got my 72 power valves here, and I'm going to chuck them in with some 50 mains. So this combination was actually a combination that was recommended to me by a guy called Robbie Brown, who drag races a pretty wild FJ Holden. His son also raced a pretty hot red matter. So speaking to Robbie and said, you know, can you recommend or remember what sort of power valves and jetting you guys ran in greys back in the day, and that's what he recommended to me. So I'm going to give it a bash and see how we go. From what I've got in it now to what Robbie's recommending, I do think it'll probably be pretty close, but I guess the proof will be in the pudding. So plan for today, chuck the 72 power valves in, chuck the 50 mains in, and see how we go. So let's get these power valves and main jets in. Let's do it. All right, step one for doing power valves, we need to take the air scoops off. So let's make that happen. So these scoops are actually off like 97 Strombergs from the States. So to get these off, we've just got a little grub screw. I've made up a couple of spaces to get them fit onto the Aussie Bendix top Strombergs. So let's get these off. So you can see the spaces that I've made up. They're held on with grub screws as well. Probably should have made them a little bit taller, because they only just reach on, but originally I was running different air scoops and they fitted perfect. But probably going to try and get these Strombergs fitted out, and then I will more than likely convert to SUs anyway, so I'm not too worried about it for now. They stay on there, they don't fall off. If I was to keep them running, I'd probably remake their spaces, but anyway, it is what it is. Let's keep going and get these spaces off. Alright, the air scoops and spacers are off. Next thing we need to do is take the choke linkage off. So as you can see, I've got the choke butterflies removed off this. Back when I was sorting it out, I thought that maybe the choke butterflies were closing slightly under full load, so I took them off just to make sure, and I haven't put them back on since. This car doesn't use a choke, so I don't need them. So they're in the carby kit, ready to put on if I put these back on a street car. So anyway, let's get this linkage off. Okay, that's off. Next thing to do is we need to take the top of the carburetors off. So to do this, unhook the return springs. I've actually got this down to an art where I can pretty much leave everything else connected, leave all the rods connected, and just undo all the screws on the top of the carburetor, and I can just lay it over. I only do one at a time, so I know what goes where. Alright, so as you can see, I've got that off. Just need to be careful when you're doing this that you don't damage your gasket. So this one's still looking good. It's been on and off a few times. Just be careful of the accelerator pump underneath too. You don't want to bend or damage that. So just gently got it hanging to the side. And if you look down in there, that's the power valve that we need to change. So let's do that. Alright, so this is the power valve. You've got to fish it out and just be careful that you don't damage the gasket here where it's a bit fine. So the other thing you have to be careful of, it's a bit hard to sort of focus it, but they have this little plunger on top. You just need to be careful, like the tool they say to use is basically a screwdriver with a notch taken out of it. You can just use a normal flat blade. You just got to be very careful and pay attention to what you're doing so you don't damage the little plunger on it. So we've got it and the old washer out. So then reverse procedure, put the new one in. Right, so the new power valve is down in its hole. Like I said, be very careful with the little plunger that you can see on the old one I took out. Ideally you'd notch your screwdriver, but if you're careful you can do it. You just got to pay attention to what you're doing and take your time. So that's it. You put your air horn back on and do the same for the rest of them. So we'll get into that. I guess something else to note is that for these Holden carbs, you can actually, the 97 Stromberg power valves and main jets all fit. So there's a lot of different sizes out there that you can get, and the 97s will fit the Aussie Bendix stuff, so definitely makes things easier. Anyway, let's get these back together and do the other two. Alright guys, so I've got the 72 power valves down in all three carburetors. These two are back together. I've got to put this one back together, but there's a few things that I wanted to point out. So I guess, as I said, just be very gentle with your gaskets as you're pulling these things apart. I've reused these a few times and managed to keep them intact. Just got to be very careful around this section where the gasket's thin. Like I said, be careful that you don't damage the top little plungers on your power valves. And yeah, there's a big range that you can use of power valves. The 97 Stromberg carburetors, the power valves fit our Aussie Bendix carbs. So a few things there. I think before I called this thing the accelerator pump. That's not, that's the vacuum power piston. So just be careful that you don't damage that plunger when you're moving things around. And of course your accelerator pump's here, and that has a setting on it too, which I'm not mucking around with today. So your float, accelerator pump, your vacuum power piston, your power valve in there, which is what I'm changing today. The other thing worth pointing out is your air horn screws for the top of the carburetors. There's 2 different sizes, so you have 3 shorter ones and 3 longer ones. The long ones go underneath the bar and the bracket for your turn spring, and the shorter ones go where there's no bars. So make sure you don't mix them up, and that's pretty much why I just do 1 carburetor at a time. So anyway, let's get this one back together, and then we'll do some main jets. Alright, so there we have it. 3 power valves changed out. It's not a big job once you've done it a few times. Just a couple of things to be careful of. Like I said, the gasket, making sure you're not damaging the top of the plungers on the power valves, and making sure you're not mixing your screws of the different lengths around. One other thing I forgot to mention when you're doing these is the screws that hold the air horns on, they're really soft. So just be careful. You can see this one's starting to get a bit munted on the top of it, so just be very gentle. It's really easy to you know, round or strip out the heads, and it's really easy to strip out the threads too, so take your time with it, and yeah, just pay attention to what you're doing. Anyway, we'll chuck the choke on, we'll chuck the air horns back on, and then we'll get on to the mains. Oh, one other thing, so Harv inspired me to sort of splash out a bit of money and invest in a bit of a kit for these things. So I did borrow Harv's tools and read his guide about 100 times, like I said. He was kind enough to lend me his tools, but I had them for a while. I returned them and, like I said, invested the money to make my own. So what I have is basically one kit has a heap of different size main jets in it, gaskets, split pins, and a few different spares and bits and pieces. So that's one kit for my main jets and bits and pieces, and then the other kit I have is for my different size power valves, again some gaskets and spare parts. So this comes everywhere with me, and this is basically what we use to tune the carbs. So shout out to Harv for the lend of the kit, and if you guys are mucking around with Stromberg, strongly suggest investing some money, put a kit together like this and you'll be sweet. Like I said, 97 mains and power valves fit, so there's plenty of stuff available to put a kit like this together. So good on you, Harv. And that's it for power valves. Power valves are in. Let's put the scoops and back on and do these mains. Alright, so carbs are all back together, scoops are on, choke linkage is back together, and we have some new 72 power valves in there as recommended by Mr. Brown. And like I said, from the testing I've been doing in it, going leaner on the power valves definitely seems to be making a lot of difference. So we'll see how the 72s go. I think they'll be pretty good from how we've been going so far. Next thing I want to do is, because I've gone leaner on the power valves, I want to go a little bit fatter on the mains just to keep things safe and slowly creep up on it. I don't want to go too lean and start doing damage. So leaner on the power valves, going a bit richer in the mains. I have actually ran 50 mains in this previously with I think it was a 67 power valve off the top of my head, and yeah, it was still had the big sluggishness down low, but it really pulled really hard in the top end. And when we pulled the plugs out and had a bit of a read of them, the plugs weren't too bad at all with the 50 mains in it. So I'm going to chuck the 50 mains in it. I do have an AFR gauge hooked up to this. Obviously, shared ports in a grey motor, so it's hard to exactly know what's going on, but this does help. So I'll chuck the 50 mains in it, 72 power valves, go do a couple of runs, and keep my eye on the AFR gauge as we're wide open throttle into it, going over the finish line, and see what AFR readings I'm getting, and from there we'll adjust the mains to suit. If it's too fat with the 50s in it, we'll lean it out slightly, but like I said, I'd rather start off too fat, not hurt anything, and creep up from it from there. So the mains is this one here. So there's a plug, a washer or a gasket, copper gasket, and the mains sit under that. So you'll need a special tool. You'll need a special tool to get into these. Harv donated one of the old ones from his kit, so the end of it is shaped to be able to extract the main, and the end of the little spanner has the right size flathead on it to get the main plug out. So the new ones out there aren't as good. I don't think they fit as good, so the old one, if you can get your hand on them, is definitely worth forking out a bit extra for. They work a lot better. So anyway, we'll get these mains out and put the 50s in. Alright, so that's the main that I've taken out from up in this hole. So there is a copper gasket. You just need to be careful you don't damage that. I also use a bit of pipe sealant or thread sealant on there, because the last thing you want is fuel dripping onto a hot exhaust. The IHRA stewards probably wouldn't be too keen on that, so make sure your gasket's okay to reuse. This one looks okay. Tidy up your threads, use a bit of thread sealant, and you're good to go. So I've got this one to do. This one's already got a 50 in it, and I'm going to chuck a 50 in the back one. So same thing, chuck your 50 in, use the other end of the tool here to take the plug out or tighten the plug up. Use that end to get your main out, and it's simple as that. Just make sure that the gasket, you either use a new one or double check that you're happy that one's good to be reused. If you don't get it right, that will piss fuel out of it, so just be careful. Alright, so we got 50 mains now in and 72 power valves. A couple of extra things to point out with the mains. Like I said, there's a copper gasket that sits behind the plug to seal it. You know, ideally I think that would be a single use item and you'd replace it every time. You know, do reuse it at your own risk, I guess is what I'm saying. I've reused it here, but I know they're right, and I use a little bit of thread sealant on the plug as well, which some old guys may or may not be having kittens about, but it works for me. Haven't seen anything go through the carbs or block anything up yet, and they don't leak, which is a bonus. So yeah, use my information at your own will. The other thing, when I have this car sitting and after I run it, I drain all the fuel out of the fuel system. This car doesn't get used enough to have fuel sitting around in the tank gumming everything up. So when I pulled these out, obviously everything was bone dry. If you're doing this in your own car and you pull them out, your fuel bowl's going to drain out of it. So be prepared for fuel to piss everywhere. If your car's hot, obviously that's pretty dangerous as well. So that's another tip to look out for. So yeah, this thing's good to go. It's buttoned up. I've got the power valves in I want. I've got the mains in I want. Next thing to do is hit the track and see what it does, and see what AFRs I can get out of it, and what times I can get out of it. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hopefully you guys pick something up out of it, and we'll see how we go at the track. See you out there. Alright, we're back. So those with an eagle eye noticed that I stuffed up when doing those main valves. Actually forgot to put one in the back carb, so I pulled the plug out, cleaned everything up, pulled the old main jet out, and then forgot to put a new one in there. It wasn't until I was packing everything up that I saw that there was a 50 main jet sitting in its little container. So I went through and pulled everything back out on all carbs and rechecked, and sure enough, I forgot to put a 50 in the back. So it's in there now. We're good to go. Work methodically, take your time, double check your work, and you should be good. We'll see how we go. Catches. Alright guys, I'm back. One more thing before we go. Dave at Right Lane Print and Media has been kind enough to take care of some merch for me. So we have done a run of shirts. There's stubby coolers, women's shirts, kids shirts available as well. You may just have to email Dave for what sizes he has available, but you can buy the stuff from Overtaking Lane. So I'll put a link below in the description. Get on there, buy a shirt. Any money that we're making from merch is going to entries and grey motor parts, because they're not cheap these days. So the shirts themselves, Cashie's gonna show us what one looks like. Hold the front up, buddy.
Yeah.
So they've got the grey ghost. Hold it up so you can see it, you doofus. Hold it up. So they've got the grey ghost logo on the front. Spin it around, Cashy. And then Ryan Ford has done the artwork for these shirts. He's done an absolute killer job. Chase, do you want to hold half of that for us? Hold it for us, boys. Hold it up. Show us the print. So yeah, Ryan Ford has done the artwork for these. He's done an absolute killer job. Like, I just sent him a few photos of the car and told him what I want done, and he come up with this. He's absolutely friggin' nailed it. So Ryan, you're a legend. Spin it around, boys. Show him the front. Hold that for us, Cashy. What do you think, boys? You guys have got a couple of shirts that you like running, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah, they look good. All right, get on there, grab a shirt. Help me buy more grey motor bits to get that nugget up there running quick. So see you, boys. Thanks.
See ya.
Thanks for watching.
Give me a big nugget.
Catches.
Give me a big